the story, or the story that will dominate our politics going for the next at least a year, maybe more, will be impeachment. The impeachment of Donald Trump. Now, I've talked about this, but I kind of wanted to give a succinct video on this. I haven't necessarily been feeling well over the past few days. I am still dragging ass a bit today. However, I need to get back on the horse. The radio show is this evening, and if I'm being honest, I've been mulling over this over the past few days. I've been watching CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, and I had the opportunity to do something I haven't did in a long time, is watch a bunch of the news shows over Sunday. I've even had the unenviable opportunity to have conversations with various Democrats on this, seeing as 91% of them believe that Trump should be impeached, and I would wager that that number probably was pretty high even before all of this stuff broke. I found myself nursing somewhat of a quiet rage and having those conversations. Oftentimes they accuse, or they would say, whataboutism. Now, whataboutism just means that it's a catch term for being a hypocrite. It's their way of trying to excuse themselves for rank corruption and hypocrisy, but it's important to deal with the other one. Meaning this notion that Donald Trump can be investigated infinitely, but the Democratic Party, not so much. Even when they are caught doing things wrong. And this is where my issue comes in. This notion of selective justice. That some established order makes one okay, but the other one not. And the problem is that we are not on the same side. Meaning, I am not a Democrat. So for me, I look at this and want, to some degree, equal justice under the law. When I look at one side and they're doing something that's flagrantly corrupt, and I call it out at the time that they are doing the thing that's flagrantly corrupt, and nobody cares, and then Trump does something that is blurring the line. I mean, it's not illegal, even though you might say it's treading the line in a certain degree of unethical. All of a sudden, everybody cares. Everybody cares. Everybody cares. Everybody jumps too. I don't look at the world in those terms. I don't look at the world in terms that one is okay and the other one is not. I look at both of them as being a fail. And the fact that Donald Trump is a clumsy oaf doesn't factor into my analysis of this particular situation, especially since there is no benefit for me in this taking place. In fact, I think it's a negative for the country. Not only is it divisive, do you realize 91% of Democrats want impeachment, 30% of Republicans? And I made this argument that what I am going to say in this video, pretty much every Republican will know by the end of this. And whatever takes place, there will be no legitimacy to the process. That was an outright partisan affair. I want to talk about impeachment, and I want to give a perspective from the left. I don't make this as the left in this kind of where it's an overarching thing. People will have their own various opinions, but as a creature of the left and finding my ideological framing of this tends to be affixed from that standpoint, I will give you my perspective. Welcome to maybe a slower, but nevertheless emphatic soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content and you find yourself coming back often, please like, share, subscribe. Oh, by the way, we're at 25,000. We have hit and transcended 25,000. I can't believe that number. I looked at it the other day. If I was in a position to do a video, I probably would have done a video at that moment. First, before I even do this show, I want to make this video succinct, less than 20 minutes. But I want to thank all of you, man. This show started like with zero. I think my mom was watching. And my wife hated me greatly for maybe a year because, in her mind, it's like, why is he dicking around in there in the room? But it became something. And not just something, I realized something that I guess I'm somewhat invested in. Her thought was, look, I have a tendency to be addictive, or have somewhat of an addictive personality when I get involved with something, be it chess, be it fucking aliens, new agey stuff, or in this case, news and information. It's always been news, or not always been information. News and politics became something different. Look, I guess my point is, thank you. You've allowed me to do the show. And whatever I can contribute to you guys in the sense of getting a video and those type of things, and trying to get topics that you might like, and opinions that might be challenging at times, because, people piss people off sometimes. But nevertheless, I try to give you my explanation and my reasoning for it, my rationale. And I think you've known me enough to know that if I thought I was wrong, I would pretty much tell you so. Thanks. I guess that's all I'm saying. Impeachment is the dumbest idea. It's a cringe. Yes. Agreed. So let's talk about impeachment. Let's do the news. The charges, and the reason that they're saying that impeachment now is necessary, because initially it was because of Russia, and then when Mueller said that wasn't the case, they said it was obstruction of justice. And then that sounds kind of stupid, because Mueller said that this thing didn't exist, but he obstructed justice for something that didn't exist. Okay, that's stupid. And then they say, well, we want to impeach him for being racist. That's a little weird in and of itself. I mean, I don't know if you can impeach a guy for the way the guy thinks. And then they wanted to impeach him for a racist tweet. And now, this. The new impeachment of the day. All right, fair enough. Let's talk about it. Supposedly, Donald Trump had a conversation with the Ukrainian president. And with that, supposedly holding aid for investigation into his political opponent that may be running in the next presidential race. Part of the problem with the argument, though, is that Trump never mentioned aid. People keep bringing that up, but Trump never mentioned aid. Also, Adam Schiff is a proven liar, and so he has no credibility to me. But I've read the whistleblower testimony, and, the whistleblower wasn't there. But whether the whistleblower was there or not is somewhat besides the point. Donald Trump released the transcript. Now, this is somewhat of a dicey prospect by itself, because think about what this means. Any president in the future, regardless of the world leader that they engage in, may have the opposition party force the president to essentially release the conversation that they had, meaning no conversation for the most part is on the books, depending upon who's in office at the time and the level that they're willing to go to. I don't doubt in the least that if Republicans take power again, they will use this in the same way the Democratic Party has used this. And they would have all the right at this point. But that's kind of besides the point. Based on the charges, essentially Trump pressured the Ukrainian prime minister to investigate Biden on behalf of using the aid package almost as a bribe of sorts. Within my political memory, and I want to go back in time, I distinctly remember, in the Obama administration, Obama used the Espionage Act more than any other president in order to lock up whistleblowers. That's true. You can look it up. It's true. Julian Assange, stuck in an embassy. Chelsea Manning, tortured. Edward Snowden ran to Russia. Kiriakou, he was in prison. There were others. I guess my point is, there's a litany of people who Obama was prosecuting using the Espionage Act who were outright whistleblowers. In fact, Snowden revealed crimes that the United States government was doing from the standpoint of mass surveillance. We also found out through WikiLeaks that the Obama White House had an organization within the White House in order to investigate journalists. That's true. Everything I just said is true. I don't even think everything I said was even in contention. Trump gets in office. And what happens? What do they say? We must protect the whistleblower, because they were leaking like a sieve. And when Trump said anything about, I got to stop these leaks, I got to stop these whistleblowers, the Democrats screamed, we must protect the whistleblowers. Now, this transition from not caring at all about whistleblowers to whistleblowers happened within the course of pretty much overnight when Trump took office. It was an amazing thing to watch. And I remember screaming at the camera, hypocrites. Because, again, When it was something that I cared about, nobody cared about it. Nobody cared about it at all. Rule of law. Secondary point. The notion that Donald Trump was supposedly working with the Russians was investigated by Mueller and found to be lacking. In the 2016 election, Sam Seder made the argument that, look, we had to look into this. He was talking to Michael Trace. I can't even add the video. He says, we had to look into this. And if we didn't look into it, we wouldn't have known the answer. So, there you go. I would say the same thing about the 2016 election from the standpoint of Trump, or from the DNC and the Ukraine. A few points. Before we go back to that point, Joe Biden, in his capacity, Joe Biden became viceroy of the Ukraine. Now, I use the term viceroy jokingly, but Obama put him in charge of the Ukraine. Within a short time later, his son, Hunter Biden, cokehead, fell out the military. I don't know how much coke you need to do to get drunk, stuff the military. Gets a job on the executive board. Talk about failing upward. With no experience in Ukraine, no experience in gas, with a nice $50,000, essentially $3 million for the pleasure of it over the period of time. Now, you tell me, you have brains, you have eyes. This looks as if Joe Biden uses influence to help somebody out, or that somebody was put there in order to, because Joe Biden was the vice president. Listen to this. So that's one point. Listen to this part.
Gotten a commitment from Poroshenko, they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here, and I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Think about what's being said here. Now, I haven't moved to 2017 yet. Trump hasn't been elected yet. I am still existing within my political memory of the Obama administration. Joe Biden is essentially saying, look, I got them to fire the prosecutor using an aid package that we were going to give them and that they desperately needed. And they did just that. They fired that prosecutor. What Joe Biden didn't say is that his cokehead son, who apparently didn't listen to enough record players, who is now on the board of this company to which he has zero experience, in a country to which he knows nothing about, was going to be investigated. That company was going to be investigated by the prosecutor that Joe Biden fired. Now you tell me, is that corruption or is that corruption? Don't take my word for it. Take the New York Times word for it, who ran the story at the exact same time Obama was in office. Meaning, Obama knew that Joe Biden was viceroy because Obama made him viceroy. But he also knew that his son was working at that company because it had been reported. This is a massive conflict of interest, and it is extraordinarily corrupt. The media, mainstream media, has been trying to make this argument that, well, Joe Biden pushed to get the guy fired because he was corrupt. Whether that guy was corrupt or not, that guy was investigating a company that was massively corrupt. And that just so happened, his son was put on the executive board of. Again, zero experience. You have brains, you have eyes. What does this look like to you? It looks like the only reason he got that job is because his dad was vice president. And that the money that he got essentially was a payoff because his dad was VP. And that Biden, looking like he's helping his kid out, fires the prosecutor that's looking into the company. Ask me what happened to that prosecution after Joe Biden got that guy fired. It went nowhere. It went nowhere. It went nowhere. It went nowhere. There are one or two things that happened. Either it died instantly or it was transferred or went to the company that Joe Biden helped start, in which case it still died. Second point, or third point, the Ukrainian intrusion into our elections. Now, media ignores this, but this is flat. Everything I'm saying is true and everything I'm saying is reported. And I'm only using reputable sources. So, Politico knew about it. Why don't mainstream media? Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfired. Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfired. The Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide in corruption and suggested that they were investigating the matter only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton allies research damaging information on Trump and his advisors, a political investigation found. It's political. That's Politico. Now, again, nobody cared. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. Let's keep going. I mean, there's more. I mean, that's not just one article. Ukrainian to U.S. prosecutors. Why don't you want our evidence? Democrats. Essentially on Democratic efforts to sabotage the election on behalf of the Democrats. Further, the Ukrainian embassy confirms that there was a DNC contractor working at the embassy. What was that contractor doing at the embassy? Chalupa was trying to get either one or two things. Information dropped into the United States or getting the Ukrainian president to mention Manafort with the hope of getting Congress to hold investigations with the notion of hurting Trump. Meaning you have the DNC directly implicated in working with the foreign government in order to hit Trump. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I agree with Sam Cedar. You need an investigation to work this out. There's a lot of weird worm-like stuff that was taking place in regards to the way that the money was being exchanged and all sorts of stuff. But the basic point is, if it's a big deal that Donald Trump was supposedly working with the Russians, well, we need 3 years of investigation and all of these millions of dollars spent, then how the hell can you ignore a Ukrainian court saying that Ukraine and various actors illegally interrupted and interfered with U.S. politics? Don't take my word for it. It's their court. It's their court. All of these documents in the bottom, you can interrogate them yourself. But, and by the way, the admission of the Ukrainian embassy only goes so far, but there's suspicions that there is more, meaning there's suspicions that they were directly working with open knowledge that this was a DNC operative and the ultimate goal was essentially to stop Trump. Now, you have a submissive Ukrainian government that relies on aid from the United States, and the assumption is that Hillary Clinton is going to win. You have brains. You have eyes. You tell me. If you're in Ukraine, what do you do? What do you do? Are you going to help the DNC in this case, since you're just assuming that Hillary Clinton is going to win that race? I mean, hell, Huffington Post had her winning, 98% chance to? What do you do? What they did was essentially assisted the DNC in trying to hurt Trump. Now, Trump hasn't taken office yet. All of this stuff happened, and nobody cared. Now, I cared because I thought it was a big deal of the intrusion into our democratic process. And I was around when the Democratic Party said they can cheat in a smoke-filled room and they can pick a candidate if they wanted to. But at that point, they were talking about cheating Sanders. This is something different. Both are shirking the democratic order, meaning both are undermining the democratic process. They're still doing it now by attacking lefties in the various states. They're still doing it now. To be called the Democratic Party, they're massively anti-democratic. So, how am I to look at this? So we move forward. Trump gets in office. The world has apparently fallen off of a cliff. And as the world has fallen off of a cliff, all of these people are now #resistance. Nobody cared before. Nobody cared. But now everybody cares. Everybody is on edge. Everybody is so, now we got to impeach. Now we got to impeach. I can show you the video of Nancy Pelosi when she was asked, why don't you impeach George Bush? And she said, it's divisive. Now, this is a man who tortured people, who literally had a prison, a gulag on the coast, illegal, or in the gray area at the very least, and got us into a war where 1 million Iraqis died. It'll be divisive. It'll be divisive. But yeah, Trump. this has been aggravating for me. Because their argument is, well, look, Trump was trying to get information on Biden. What I accept is that Donald Trump probably was trying to get information in order to hurt Biden in the race. Problem is, it's probably true. Meaning, not all of the stuff that Donald Trump is talking about in that document is true. The problem is some of it is. And if he's saying, look, I want you to investigate Joe Biden for real crimes, that's different. That's different. I'm sorry. That's different. And not just different, not worse than everything that I just showed you that the Democratic Party was doing. Trump hasn't been going after whistleblowers. Obama had. And I'm sorry, the evidence points to the Ukraine working with the DNC, not Trump working with the Russians. But yeah, what about ism? I guess my point is this. How are you going to impeach somebody whom you are accusing of doing the exact same thing that you did? And not just the exact same thing that you did. It is very possible that Joe Biden actually did commit crimes. Joe Biden did hold funding in order to get a prosecutor fired. Whatever excuse they want to give for the reason he did it, he's on stage saying he did it. But now, Trump. Selective justice, I'm sorry, is not justice. It is one side picking and choosing winners, and they want you to ignore the fact that their side was not just doing the exact same thing, but in some respects doing worse. Donald Trump is clumsy, yes. Granted. But despite Donald Trump being clumsy and what he was talking about, you have to, at the very least, question is what he's saying to any degree legit. Because ultimately, if you're arguing for impeachment, you have to ignore all the shit that Democrats did, essentially lining up to it. And on top of that, you have to show how this, to some degree, look, my basic point is this. Is there a reality to what Trump is saying? Yes. Maybe not all of it. Some of that stuff would be conspiracy theories. But when it gets to the bare bones of intrusion into the U.S. politics, and if you're asking a foreign government where that intrusion took place to look into it, how the hell can that be wrong? And if you're going to argue that you can't look into the actions of the last administration, then that would mean that the Democratic Party could in no way look into the actions of George Bush in order to impeach. And I think that's ludicrous. If something took place in 2016 where there was malfeasance between the DNC and the Ukrainian government, it should be investigated. How can you not investigate that after this nonsense with Robert Mueller? And for them to say they're going to impeach him over this, look, you can do whatever you want. I find this to be a clown show. My angst or my anger about this has more to do with the level of hypocrisy that is off the fucking scale in the way that they look at Trump versus the way they looked at everything else in the last administration. Impeachment is nonsense. If you are literally about to run in a presidential campaign, you know what is going to be the topic of that campaign? Impeachment. You know what should have been the topic? Everything that Trump touched, he failed in doing. Whether you want to talk about a potential war in the Middle East. And by the way, one last point to this. Wag the dog. Wag the dog. I don't know if you guys know what that means. So there was a movie called Wag the Dog. Now, when Bill Clinton was getting his blowjobs from Monica Lewinsky, and this became a big deal, this is again within my political memory, he got into a war in Kosovo. Croatia. No, Kosovo. It was Kosovo, I believe. And the argument was Bill Clinton is trying to divert attention away from these problems in his country by essentially starting a war. Right now, the Houthis have taken, I think it was thousands of Saudis. And not just taken Saudis, also taken the land, meaning what Saudi Arabia looks like on a map is different now. They've lost their integrity, meaning the country itself has lost their integrity. Now, the question becomes, what is the United States response going to be? What is Donald Trump's response going to be? If Trump is really doing this protection for oil thing, how much of his head is in the king's ass in this case? Those troops were sent over there. It's always called defense at first. Does that defense become more offense? And not just does it become more offense, do they say, which they have done in the past, that the capabilities of the Houthis have been augmented by the Iranians, in which case it allows us to have some level of back and forth with the Iranians. I watched television all day yesterday, or at the very least for like 3 hours, the clinic visit. Nothing about that. Like you don't understand. That is such a big deal. We have been protecting Saudi Arabia for all of these years. Saudi Arabia has like the 5th expensive military, and yet a band of rebels have literally been able to outlast them. I mean, they've been massacring Houthis, Yemenis with our help. But not just outlast them, but have gotten to the point was able to strike them, knocking down 5% of the world's oil market, and take hostages in regards to taking the intruding into the country's integrity itself. What is Trump's response going to be? And is Trump's response going to be something that will deviate the news cycle to whatever he does? Meaning, is it such an overreaction where the media essentially goes to what he's doing as opposed to what is taking place from the standpoint of impeachment? It's called wag the dog. Let's go wag the dog. I don't like this. I think it's a horrible idea. And yes, this destroys Joe Biden's campaign. Joe Biden's campaign is toast. There's no way that the media can protect Joe Biden on this front. He looks massively corrupt, not just in the Ukraine, but also in China, where his son, again, accumulated all of this money from the Bank of China. Mainstream media doesn't want to touch it. However, some media outlets have been touching it, and some media outlets have been bringing up footage of Joe Biden in other contexts with his son. For example, this article by New York Times. This was out at the time where Obama was in office, meaning Obama knew exactly the problems associated with Joe Biden and his son in that country, in Ukraine, meaning getting rich off that country. CBS reported Biden and his kid. Where is it? All right. Oh, here we are. Fox News uncovers photo of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden with Ukrainian company board members. That doesn't look corrupt at all. Joe Biden knew what was going on. That's massive corruption. And they didn't care. And mind you, this was one of those things where it was known at the time. All of this will become fodder for debate. Every Republican would know everything that I just said. However, the impeachment hearing comes out. And if they know that, and if they know, A, they never gave him a fair shot, B, they never accepted him, and yeah, there's a certain degree of hypocrisy in that process because Donald Trump kept saying that Obama was illegitimate, and Democrats essentially responded in kind with this notion that Donald Trump is illegitimate from jump. But I'm not a part of their process. I don't care what the parties want. I don't care in the sense that the parties have all sorts of entangled hypocrisies associated with the way they behave. I look at our playing field, and my job is to say law, or at the very least how we judge this stuff, should be fair. And it's this notion of a selective justice where we look at one side and be like, okay, it's okay. But the other side, outrage. I don't buy into that process at all. And any right-winger that is a Trump supporter that looks at that is going to come to the exact same conclusion. And I'm not even a fucking Trump supporter. They're coming to the conclusion for different reasons. Don't misunderstand me. It's their guy, so they're just supporting their guy. They don't necessarily care. But they wouldn't necessarily entirely be wrong on that front. If you don't have credibility in the process, then there's going to be hell to pay. Catch up, Pete's man. Hey, man, I disagree with some things you say, but truth tellers like you need to be supported. Thanks, man. Donald Smead, crazy question. Couldn't Donald Trump claim he swore to defend the Constitution against both foreign and domestic threats? Do you think he would claim to swamp the day? He did. That's his argument. Donald Trump's argument, and the video that he's put out, is essentially that he is trying to defend the country and that the Democratic Party won't let him. And that Joe Biden was one of those swamp creatures that he was talking about. And he was trying to get the prosecutor to essentially look into swamp creature Joe Biden. That is the campaign video that he has released, and that is the argument that Donald Trump has been making. He's using this to run on. That's my point. This is literally, at this point, he's gone into campaign mode on this very specific issue. Essentially saying Democrats are trying to stop me from cleaning out the swamp. Here we are. This is Trump's video.
Company.
The prosecutors.
Joe Biden promised Ukraine $1 billion. If they fired the prosecutor investigating his son's company.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
But when President Trump asks Ukraine to investigate corruption, the Democrats want to impeach him, and their media lapdogs fall in line. They lost the election. Now they want to steal this one.
And you know the fucked up about it? It's true. It's true. Trump is a flagrant liar. Unfortunately for them, everything in this video just so happens to be true. And it gets massively fucking complicated. And the wild part about it is, if I was Trump, I would be hitting the Ukrainian thing. I mean, honestly, I would be screaming to high heaven that the DNC had an operative in the Ukraine as a flat fact. That's true. I would argue that they released information to hurt Manafort. That's also true. And that the operative wanted to do just that. And that it is not a leap of logic to say that if the operative wanted to do that and he was working with the government in some kind of way, there's some coordinated action between the two. The question becomes, was the Obama administration involved in that process? I will be screaming at heaven. You know, it's funny. I often think that it is fortunate for the Democratic Party that they don't have... Meaning, look, I don't know if Trump knows this part. If he doesn't, then he has not been a good steward. If I'm not mistaken, I've heard Giuliani mention this. I covered this story months ago because the story was reported on months ago. The mainstream media entirely ignored this factor. And like, you have no idea how annoyed I get with this. Because I'm supposed to care greatly about one and not about the other. And I don't quite understand why they think that. Donald Trump is going to argue that. That is literally what Trump is arguing. Peter version 1, Trump will win against Biden or Warren. Peter version 1, I think you're right. Biden is sundowning. Biden can't even stand up to the debates currently. He will be bullied. He will be bullied. Look back at the debates between Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Sanders, not Sanders so much, because Sanders wasn't necessarily doing that, Kamala Harris. All of them, everybody that he's had back and forths with have bullied him. And when Joe Biden had the opportunity to kind of talk off the cuff, what did he say? Black folks couldn't raise their kids, and they need to send government workers into the house, and they need to listen to record player more. This is a guy who had a crackhead son. So, let's put this shit in perspective. Xavier Foster, Adam Schiff has ties to huge Ukrainian arms dealer with Soros ties. Don't believe me, look it up. They're trying to stop Trump from exposing crimes. Xavier Foster. Well, two things are true at once, Xavier. I mean, it's not... Look, this video by no means is a rah-rah Trump. It's not. And I think I might have mentioned Trump, but I mentioned him only in the context of, now everybody is supposed to care because Trump got elected. No, Trump is not an angel in this process, and I have no belief, none, zero, that Donald Trump was engaging in that entirely and purely just to figure out what happened in 2016 in the Drain the Swamp. I think he did want to know what happened. I think he wanted to know what happened in the context of putting a knife in his opponent. He's not necessarily entirely wrong for that. I mean, that is literally what the DNC did to him. But whether the DNC did that to him or not, they had enough sense not to make it so so close. Like, he has no finesse as a politician, none. And you could say that's a good thing, you could say that's a bad thing, but that is a thing that can get you put in prison, especially when you have an animated hysterical following or group of people who all of a sudden at this particular moment now greatly care about the things that are going on and that have been going on for the last two administrations, this one and the last. Not in its entirety, of course, and not necessarily at the same fever pitch. But I got to be honest, the Democratic Party has become massively anti-democratic. And I understand, don't misunderstand me, the Republican Party is voter suppression and all of those other racist policies that they put in order to try to keep themselves in power. But let's be very clear, what took place in 2016 is a dodgy process. And the last thing I think we want is for this to become standard hat. Meaning where one party works with the government of another party. And don't misunderstand me. We've had governments to do this in the past. Ronald Reagan supposedly working in order to keep the hostages in just before, in order to make his chances better of getting elected. Or Nixon not allowing Thomas Jefferson, Johnson's plan to go through, even though he ended up with the exact same plan. I mean, we've had presidents to work with other countries before in somewhat of a back channel way, but what the DNC did was vicious. I mean, it was just out and out corruption. I guess my point is, Donald Trump might be trying to expose crimes, but he's trying to expose them in order to get reelected. Let's be very clear. This has nothing to do with draining the swamp. If he wanted to drain the swamp, I think he would have had his prosecutors taking the lead on this, as opposed to Giuliani. But whatever. Two things can be true at once. Multiple things can be true at once. Donald Smee, it would be great to see you interview Bob Baer, the CIA operative, which, I know who he is, which was based on. Have you read the book, See No Evil? I haven't read the book, but I've seen him give lectures. Baer is good. I like him. He's fascinating. And Sirianni was amazing. Peter version 1, I hate when I talk about Biden's corruption. People supposedly on the left hate when I hate. When they hear that. Yeah, they do. They do. Which is why I call them hypocrites. I watched Bill Maher the other day. And in fact, at this point, we're into the show at this point. So I'm going to show this video. Bear with me for a moment. I know the screen is black. I think this is it. Here we are.
Who profits from this as far as Democratic presidential candidates go? At first, I thought it would have been Joe Biden because now he's elevated. He's the villain, not the hero that the villain is opposing and elevating in this matter. But you know what? The more I read about this, no, I don't think he was doing something terrible in Ukraine, but it's just so, why can't politicians tell their fucking kids, get a job? Get a goddamn job. I mean, this kid was paid $600,000 because his name is Biden, buying a gas company in Ukraine, this super corrupt country that just had a revolution to get rid of corruption. It just looks bad. And the Republicans are geniuses at muddying the water. Just know it's all going to be about, you did this in Ukraine, well, Joe Biden did this.
It's too swampy, and the anti-swamp candidate is Elizabeth Warren. I say Elizabeth Warren gets to win.
The wild part is, Bill Maher sees it, but he recoils from it. He's like, the more I read about it, it's swampy. Well, it's not swampy, it's corrupt. It's corrupt. It's outright, out and out corruption. It's not a muddying the water or anything. Joe Biden was massively corrupt. His kid, cokehead, no experience, gets a job as an executive at the exact same time that Joe Biden, just so happens, becomes in charge of the Ukrainian affairs. And then the prosecutor, who's investigating Joe Biden's son, gets fired. Now, the only reason that board would have put Joe Biden's son on that board was because his last name was Biden. Bill Maher knows that. He understands it. And yet he recoils from it. And listen to the way this conversation goes. It's so bizarre.
Who profits from this as far as Democratic presidential candidates go? At first, I thought it would have been Joe Biden because now he's elevated. He's the villain, not the hero that the villain is opposing and elevating in this matter. But you know what? The more I read about this, no, I don't think he was doing something terrible in Ukraine, but it's just so, why can't politicians tell their fucking kids, get a job? Get a goddamn job. I mean, this kid was paid $600,000 because his name is Biden by a gas company in Ukraine, this super corrupt country that just had a revolution to get rid of corruption. It just looks bad. And the Republicans are geniuses at muddying the water. Just know it's all going to be about, you did this in Ukraine, well, Joe Biden did this.
It's too swampy, and the anti-swamp candidate is Elizabeth Warren. I say Elizabeth Warren gets to win off this.
I say this is the kind of speculation that may keep us busy when we're bored, but nobody will know what the American people are ultimately going to say. I will say this, when you're talking about Trump versus Biden, Donald Trump's extended family has made more money off the connection to Donald Trump in the 3 years since he was elected than Hunter Biden could make in 10 lifetimes.
Say it.
Being accused, but being accused of having your family profit from your political preeminence by Donald Trump is like being called silly by the Three Stooges.
Ivanka's trying to trademark. Ivanka's trying to trademark.
I understand, but that's going to...
But that's what aboutism. We don't do this on the show. It's too easy. We do better on the show. I think Elizabeth Warren wins because she is an anti-corruption candidate.
She's not
Obviously,
anti-corruption.
Trump's children are all degenerates who haven't worked a day in their lives. But
I disagree with that.
but we shouldn't be the same on the other side.
By the
We
way,
should
Bill,
do better.
it's not an operational matter. I think, again, we would have been better off if we were not morally compelled to impeach. I do think that other people see this, and already, by the way, the pro-impeachment polls have gone up 5%.
Yeah,
just
that's
a few
true.
days.
Right.
So I think that this is an open question, but who's going to benefit or not is irrelevant.
It does sound like something Don Jr. would do. And if Don Jr. did it, it would be all Rachel Maddow was talking about.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's true. That's absolutely, entirely true. You know, the wild part about this is they're like, oh, that's whataboutism and we should be better and everything else. What the hell are you talking about? They have this vision of themselves that is not indicative of reality. First, the revolution, quote unquote, was a coup pushed by Western powers in order to essentially topple that government. If that was France, like the Yellow Vest movement, that shit would have never been on television. You would have never heard about it, and they would have tried to suppress it and quiet it as fast as they could. Do you realize we've been supporting Nazis in order to push back against, quote unquote, Russian interference? Now, the catch here is that we have been expanding the borders. Ukraine now, that particular part, that submissive version of Ukraine that's Western backed wants to join NATO, which will, again, expand NATO closer to the borders of Russia. Bill Maher doesn't know what he's talking about. He has a point of view of the world that is not necessarily indicative of, I'm sorry, reality. In this particular point, though, however, he looks at this and he's like, yeah, that's corrupt. That's massively corrupt. And for whatever reason, Barney Frank seems to think that the amount of corruption matters. Meaning, somebody who profited like to the tune of $3 million, that we should look at that. Look, whether he realizes it or not, at the time where he was making that money, Trump wasn't in office. Meaning Biden was corrupt without the balance of Trump. You're adding Trump in now in order to kind of justify Joe Biden's corruption. But I'm making the point that when the corruption was taking place, Trump wasn't in office. There wasn't something to compare it to. Biden's corruption is a thing unto itself that stands. That's a maddening thing to watch. Oh, we should be better. That's whataboutism. Yes, you're correct in saying that you all are hypocrites on this particular issue and that you are talking to yourselves as if you're in a goddamn bubble. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right. Warren, anti-corruption. No, yes, I don't know. I need to check my plan right. I don't know whether she's anti-corruption or not. I just think she's not trustworthy. Trina, be fine. This could be the last presidential election I vote in. I will not cast my vote for fascism of any kind. Yeah, agreed. Trina, agreed. I am not supporting a party that is outright anti-democratic. And, you know, I don't like being in this process where they don't want to just win in an election. They want to win by loophole. And that's profoundly problematic. That is profoundly problematic. Oh, double the sound. We hear 2 audio tracks on. So I can't control the sound on the Bill Maher clip. That's not something I have power over. I'll probably do another video and I will try to see if I can get a better version of that clip. I wasn't planning on playing that one today. Yeah, my bad, dude. All right. I'm going to end this. Copyright strike, I know, right? All right, let me try. Well, I'm going to do that video in a different video. The Bill Maher video wasn't intended to be there. She keeps calling Warren the anti-corruption candidate. Yeah, that's nonsense. Nonsense. All right. Like, share, subscribe. This one has went long. I hope I made my point. I think the impeachment thing is nonsense. It's kind of like Mike Tyson biting somebody's ear off. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. If that doesn't get him thrown out of boxing, what does? And then somebody else comes and hits somebody in the balls or something, and they hate the guy, so they kick the guy out of boxing. I mean, it's just bizarre. I had this analogy where it was like, if I am driving, if I'm driving on my street, let's say there's an area of Richmond, and in that area of Richmond, somebody does an analysis of all the tickets that were given. And they found that of all the traffic stops, of everybody that was white that was stopped, 70% essentially get a pass. You get to walk. However, for blacks, 80% get a ticket. Now, if I'm the statistician that knows that, I know that. I know that this is, this particular area. And by the way, it doesn't have to be blacks. It could be blacks doing it to whites. It could be women doing it to other men. Whatever the reason, whatever the justification, whatever the systemic thing in the statistics, it comes out that particular way. I get stopped. I get a ticket. How am I to think about that ticket? I'm going to look at this as this is a bullshit ticket. If I was a particularly gender or race or color, whatever else, I would 70 to 80% chance get a pass. But now you're giving me a ticket. The cop will say what the Democrats are saying now. Well, you were stopped and you were speeding. You were going 2 miles over the speed limit. Technically, you were speeding. And so I'm giving you a ticket. I'm going to be outright indignant about this. And anybody, especially a group, a constituency that finds this out is going to think that the entire system is fucking bogus and is not only not pay that ticket, not only ferociously fight in court about it. I guess my point is it tarnishes any notion of legitimacy of the process. The moment that you know that there's a deviation, that there's a bias, that there's a selective justice that's being involved in the process. How does the cop justify giving me a ticket when I know that 70 to 80% of people who don't look like me skate? By the same token, I was going 2 miles over the speed limit. Like, the system loses legitimacy. That's my point. Selective justice is not justice. You can't have a system or process where one side is okay with doing all sorts of corruption and all sorts of underhanded stuff for their ends. And because media doesn't cover it, and because the public doesn't really care about it, it gets a pass. The other guy does. He's an ogre. He's gross. He's racist. He's sexist. He's bigoted. He's all these things. 99% of the things you would say about Trump, I would probably agree. But by the same token, is he not still held under equal justice of sorts? I'm problem by this, man. I'm bothered by it. All right. I'm going to end this. Both sides have their mega gaslighting news outlets. Yes, that's true. Martian Villager. We should push JT to cover Africa, Asia, and Latin America more. You don't have to push me for it. Just tell me. Just tell me what you want. Order of Chaos, Revolution. See, and that's the issue, right? The moment that you get a process where people look at it and say, this is a bullshit process. Well, and they have legitimacy to think so. It becomes somewhat of a bullshit process. If I am being stopped and I know that like in New York you had a system where 80% of the people that were stopped were black or Hispanic. Now, what are blacks and Hispanics to think about that? And what did they think about that? They thought it was a bullshit process. They thought it was a fucking racist process. Why? Because you had an unequal system of justice where one side gets a pass and the other side, not so much. And no, it wasn't absolute, meaning you did have that 5 or 10% of whites that get pulled over, but for the majority of the people who got stopped, they were people who look like me. I guess I'm making the point. Either it's equal justice under the law, either there's some level of fairness under the law, or there's not. And if there's not, then you have this notion of selective justice. That's not justice. It's not justice at all. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. You know, it's funny, Nutslayer. Yeah, I have a bad tendency of doing that. Nuna Beeswax. I have a tendency of doing that. Beltazar. Jamal, I'm gonna end this here before I remember to check my Streamlabs. Did I forget to? Yes, I did forget to check my Streamlabs. Good pointing that out, Beltazar. Thank you. I don't want to miss those. People yell at me. Beltazar, fuck Biden, fuck his kids, fuck all the permanent landed gentry who stay in power in the Democratic Party. The party needs to die so a proper workers' party can see a rise from the ashes. Fucking yes. Everything to you. This is why the elites hate Trump. He's exposing the whole political game. Top politicians on both sides use power to get their families employed in these corporations in exchange for political fame. Yes, that's true. Beltazar, it's all a smokescreen to reveal HRC 20. Oh God, don't say that. I'm scared of saying that. It's like Baltimore. I don't want that shit to come alive. It's a smokescreen to reveal the HRC 2020. By God, it must be her turn now. You know, somebody had said that Joe Biden was going to bring in Hillary Clinton as his vice president, then resign or something like that for that woman to be president. God, don't say that, Beltazar. Don't say that, dog. Don't say that, man. Don't say that. That hurts. Elizabeth, Jamal forgot to check your Streamlabs. I got it. I did get it. Yeah, Bel, I agree with you, man. This is on point. Fuck Biden, fuck his kids, fuck all the permanent. The party needs to die so a proper workers' party can. Yeah, man. I mean, ultimately, what you're saying is just corruption on both sides, and the media giving one side a pass, and not just corruption on both sides. Corruption in the way that is literally intruding into our politics, meaning working with foreign governments to intrude in our politics. I mean, this is literally what took place, and it wasn't the Russians. Or if there was, look, I don't know if the Russians were intruding or not. I gotta be honest, I don't particularly care. What we do know as a flat fact is that Ukraine did. At least their court said so. Like, share, subscribe.